Christmas used to feel like validation, like a quiet ceremony where my sacrifices were confirmed without needing applause. The house in Denver stood wrapped in snow that night, white powder resting on the roofline, the gutters, the silent trees in the yard. From the street it looked like a postcard, warm light spilling through the windows, a wreath on the door, the illusion of harmony glowing from within. I paid for those lights. I paid for the wreath. I paid for the mortgage, the renovations, the mahogany table stretching across the dining room where we were all seated that evening pretending to be whole. For years, I told myself that being a stepfather meant understanding your role would always be complicated. You enter mid-story. You inherit memories you weren't part of. You compete with ghosts. I accepted that. I never demanded to replace Derek. I never tried to erase him, but I outworked him. That was my quiet answer. While he drifted through holidays with loud laughter and exaggerated promises, I stayed. When Emily needed braces, I handled the orthodontist. When her laptop died during sophomore year of college, I replaced it overnight. When tuition statements came in from Boulder, I didn't forward them. I paid them. I told myself presence would outweigh biology. I told myself consistency would matter. At that table, candles flickering against polished glass, I watched Emily laugh at something on her phone. 24 years old, educated, successful enough to run her own online boutique, a boutique I financed when no bank would take her seriously. I remembered sitting beside her at the kitchen counter 3 years earlier as she sketched logo ideas, anxious and uncertain. "I believe in you," I had said, and I meant it. That night, she stood. The movement was sudden but graceful, like she had rehearsed it. She tapped her fork against her glass. Linda's eyes lit up instantly, already sensing something dramatic and beautiful was coming. I felt anticipation rising in my chest. This is what fathers wait for, I thought. Milestones. Recognition. Emily extended her left hand into the candlelight. A diamond caught the room. Gasps. Applause. Linda pressed her hands to her mouth. I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. I was proud of her. I was proud that she had built a life sturdy enough for this moment. I imagined the venue, the catering, the photographer. I imagined myself standing at the aisle's end, steady and composed, walking her forward into her future. Then she spoke again. "Oh, and Dad's going to walk me down the aisle." The word landed carefully, deliberately. There was a brief pause, a flicker. Maybe she expected me to object. Maybe she didn't think of me at all. I kept smiling. "Derek's thrilled," she added lightly. "He always dreamed of that moment." Of course he did. Dreams are easy when you're not the one paying for them. Linda nodded beside me, calm, almost relieved. "It wouldn't really be your place," she said softly, as if clarifying a seating arrangement. "Not your place." The room didn't explode. No one shouted. No plates shattered. But something inside me fractured with surgical precision. I remembered the winter Emily had pneumonia at 16. I drove her to urgent care at 2 in the morning while Linda stayed home, exhausted. I remembered signing insurance forms, arguing billing errors, sitting in the chair beside her hospital bed while she slept. Derek had sent a text. "Hope she's okay." I remembered the tuition payments, semester after semester, watching my savings account thin while telling myself this was what fathers did. I remembered refinancing a portion of my investments to help her boutique survive its first year. Derek had posted online about proud dad moments. And here we were. I lifted my wine glass. "To your happiness," I said. My voice didn't shake. That was the strangest part. I felt like I was watching myself from across the room. A composed man congratulating his stepdaughter while silently recalculating 16 years of investment. The rest of dinner carried on with laughter and wedding talk. Venues in Santa Barbara were mentioned, specifically my oceanfront condo, the one I had purchased years ago as both an investment and a promise. Emily had once told me she pictured her wedding photos taken there, sunset spilling over the Pacific behind her veil. Now Derek would stand beside her in those photographs. I wasn't erased angrily. I was erased casually. That hurt more. After dessert, I stepped outside. Snow muffled the city's sound. Denver felt suspended in quiet perfection. I stood there breathing in cold air, trying to understand what I felt. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't wounded pride. It was recognition. I had mistaken financial devotion for emotional belonging. Inside, I heard laughter. Linda's voice floating through the door. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't malicious. But she had always chosen the path of least friction. And acknowledging me in that moment would have created friction. So she didn't. That night, lying beside her in bed, I stared at the ceiling. Years unspooled in my mind like ledger entries. College tuition, paid. Car, paid. Medical bills, paid. Boutique startup, funded. Vacations to Miami, covered. Holiday gifts from both parents. Mostly mine. What had I received? Politeness, occasional gratitude, never acknowledgement, never the title, and now, officially, not even the place. I turned slightly, listening to Linda's steady breathing. She slept without tension. To her, nothing irreversible had happened. But something had. Christmas had always symbolized generosity to me. Giving without expectation. Love expressed through provision. That night, generosity felt like self-deception. 10 days, I decided. I wouldn't argue at the table. I wouldn't bring it up in the morning. I wouldn't demand retroactive appreciation. I would simply adjust reality to match the truth they had spoken. If I had no place, then I had no obligation to maintain the structure. They believed I would cool off. They believed my silence meant acceptance. But my silence was calculation. The foundation of this family had never been emotional. It had been financial stability wrapped in quiet endurance. And if I stepped away from that role, I wanted to see what remained. Was there love beneath it? Or only dependency? Christmas dinner had given me clarity. Not rage. Clarity. So I ask you, when a man realizes he has been valued for his resources rather than his presence, what is he meant to protect? His pride? Or his peace? Would you have stayed seated at that table? Or would you have begun counting the cost? I didn't argue. That's what surprised Linda the most in the days after Christmas. She waited for a confrontation. A slammed door. A bitter remark thrown across the kitchen island while coffee brewed between us like steam from a warning flare. But I gave her nothing. I kissed her cheek before work. I asked Emily about venues. I nodded when Derek's name came up again. I behaved exactly as expected. Inside, I was dismantling everything. It wasn't rage driving me. Rage is loud, reckless. Rage wants witnesses. What I felt was colder, measured, surgical. A slow realization that I had built a system that excluded me, and that I was the only one maintaining it. On the third day after Christmas, I opened my office door and locked it. The house was quiet. Linda had gone to yoga. Emily was out with her fiancé. I sat at my desk surrounded by framed photos, vacations in Miami, birthdays, graduation day in Boulder. In every image, I stood slightly off-center, present but not central. That detail hadn't bothered me before. Now it felt symbolic. I opened my laptop and accessed the portfolio for the family business. For years, I had kept a majority stake under my name but reinvested profits into shared accounts. Stability, growth, security. For them. 10 days, I had told myself. This was day 3. I contacted my attorney first. Calm voice, neutral language. I explained I wanted to restructure ownership, bring in a new partner, reduce personal exposure. He asked if everything was all right at home. Yes, I said. It wasn't a lie. Everything was clear. By day 5, paperwork was drafted. By day 7, the transfer was initiated. Shares moved quietly into new hands. Investments redirected into accounts only I controlled. I didn't hide it, I simply didn't announce it. Then I opened the listing documents for the oceanfront condo in Santa Barbara. The condo had always been more than property. It was a symbol of arrival. Floor-to-ceiling glass facing the Pacific. A balcony that caught sunset like fire. Emily had once stood there at 19, wind in her hair, saying, "If I ever get married, I want pictures here." I had imagined walking her across that sand. Instead, Derek would. So I called the realtor. "I'm ready to sell," I said. There was a pause. Surprise. Then enthusiasm. The market was strong. It wouldn't sit long. Good. On day 10, the villa reservation in Miami, the one Linda had secured for wedding week, was canceled. Deposits forfeited. Credit lines closed. Automatic contributions to Emily's boutique frozen pending review. I didn't make a speech. I waited. Took 4 more days. The first crack appeared when Linda received a notification from the bank. A polite email requesting confirmation about the business restructuring. She brought her laptop into the kitchen where I was reading. "Why is your ownership percentage different?" she asked, confusion softening her voice. "I adjusted my exposure," I replied. "Adjusted?" "Yes." She stared at the screen longer than necessary. "You didn't mention it." There wasn't anything to mention. The room cooled. 2 days later, Emily called from her apartment. I heard only Linda's side of the conversation at first. Short answers. A tight jaw. "What do you mean the credit line is frozen?" Linda said finally. Silence from the phone. She looked at me. I met her gaze without expression. "It's temporary," I said before she asked. "I'm reassessing long-term allocations." Emily drove over that evening. She walked into the house smiling, the same casual confidence from Christmas. But the smile faltered when she saw both of us seated at the dining table waiting. "Is this about the boutique?" she asked lightly. "It's about clarity," I answered. She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I've restructured my finances. The condo is listed. The business has a new partner. Non-essential funding is paused." "Non-essential?" Her voice sharpened. "Yes," Linda intervened. "He's just adjusting things. Don't overreact." Emily's eyes flicked between us. "What about the wedding photos at the condo?" "It's being sold," I said. The words landed heavier than I expected. She laughed once, disbelieving. "You're joking." "I'm not." Silence. For the first time since Christmas, her composure cracked. "You can't just do that," she said. "We already talked to photographers." "I can," I replied calmly. "It's mine." That word hung there. Mine. Derek's name wasn't mentioned. It didn't need to be. They kept smiling that week. Kept pretending this was temporary. That I would cool off. That stability would resume once my pride settled. But then the Miami villa cancellation came through. Then the boutique supplier called asking about delayed payments. Then the wedding planner inquired about missing deposits. The smiles faded. Derek, newly elevated to real father, was suddenly quiet. Emily called him. I could hear fragments through the hallway. "I thought you said you'd help." "Well, he always paid before." "It's not that simple." Of course it wasn't. Loud promises rarely survive invoices. Linda tried to soften it. "This is a misunderstanding," she insisted one night in the bedroom. "You're taking one comment too far." "One comment?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer. Because it wasn't one comment. It was years of small erosions. Years of being the steady resource while another man held the title. I hadn't raised my voice once. I hadn't insulted Derek. I hadn't demanded apology. I had simply stepped back. And as I stepped back, the structure shifted. The wedding budget shrank overnight. Venue negotiations became strained. Flights for extended family were suddenly under review. Emily's boutique slowed without injections of quiet capital. They weren't angry at what was said on Christmas. They were afraid of what was lost afterward. One evening, I overheard Emily whispering to Linda in the kitchen. "He's doing this on purpose," she said. Yes, I thought. I was, but not out of cruelty. Out of recognition. For years, I had confused love with obligation. I had believed that continuing to give would eventually earn place. Christmas proved otherwise, so I stopped giving. Not everything, just what made me invisible. And now the question was simple. If I wasn't family without my money, would I be family without it? Tell me, when a man removes the safety net he built and everyone panics, is he cruel? We're finally honest. The house changed first. Not physically. The walls didn't crack. The lights still turned on. The heat still ran through the vents. But the air shifted thinner, sharper, like something essential had been quietly removed and everyone could feel the absence without naming it. For years, I had been the silent guarantee. If something went wrong, I absorbed it. If money ran short, I covered it. If a plan expanded beyond its budget, I adjusted accounts until the numbers made sense again. Now I did nothing. And nothing, I learned, is louder than anger. The wedding planner called on a Tuesday afternoon. Emily had stepped outside to take it. I watched her through the living room window as she paced the driveway, one hand pressed against her forehead. "What do you mean the deposit didn't clear?" she snapped. Pause. "No, that's not possible. It's always covered." Always. That word again. She walked back inside slowly, as if entering a hospital room where the prognosis was already known. Her eyes met mine across the room. No greeting. No small talk. "Did you reverse the venue deposit?" she asked. "Yes." Her jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because I'm no longer financing it." Linda intervened quickly, her tone pleading. "We're just rebalancing. It's temporary." I didn't correct her. Temporary is a comforting lie. Emily laughed, brittle, disbelieving. "You're sabotaging my wedding." "No," I said calmly. "I'm stepping out of it." The difference mattered. She stared at me like I'd committed a betrayal. But what is betrayal? Is it refusing to fund a celebration where you've been told you have no place? Or is it accepting a man's devotion for years while reminding him he isn't real? Derek was suddenly very busy. Emily called him twice that week. I heard the conversations grow shorter each time. He had enthusiasm. He had pride. What he didn't have was liquidity. "I'll see what I can do," he said. Speakerphone accidentally loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. He couldn't do much. The boutique faltered next. Suppliers tightened terms. Inventory orders slowed. Without quiet capital injections smoothing delays, the operation began showing its true margins. Emily had talent. She had vision. What she lacked was insulation. Insulation I had provided. One evening she came to my office door and knocked. Not barging in. Not demanding. Knocking. "That's not what I meant on Christmas," she said. I let the silence stretch before answering. "What did you mean?" She hesitated. It's tradition. Dad walking me down the aisle. It doesn't mean you're not important." Important. A word used for friends, mentors, supporters, not fathers. "Tradition is a powerful excuse," I said quietly. She flinched. Linda tried to mediate. She framed it as misunderstanding, as stress, as hormones and wedding pressure. She wanted the narrative softened, smoothed, rewritten into something survivable. But this wasn't about one toast. It was about years. Years of small acknowledgments withheld. Years of Derek being called Dad in rooms where I was introduced by first name. Years of me signing checks while standing slightly outside the emotional frame. I didn't explode. I didn't insult. I simply didn't resume. The florist required payment confirmation. Flights for extended family were repriced when the villa booking disappeared. The Santa Barbara photographer moved on to another client once the condo listing went public. Each logistical domino fell quietly, and with each one, the tone shifted. "It's not what we meant. You're taking this too personally. We thought you understood." Understood what? That my role was financial? That my presence was conditional? One night, late, Linda sat across from me at the kitchen table. No makeup, no performance, just exhaustion. "You're hurting her," she said softly. "I didn't start this," I replied. "She didn't mean to erase you." "She did." The word landed between us. Linda's eyes filled. "She loves you." "Does she?" I asked. Love without recognition feels like convenience. The wedding budget was halved within 2 weeks. The venue downgraded. Guest list trimmed. The Miami week abandoned entirely. Derek contributed what he could. Symbolic amounts that looked generous in conversation but barely dented invoices. Reality stripped away ceremony. Emily's tone changed next. Less defiant. More measured. "We can adjust," she said one evening, sitting across from me. "It doesn't have to be extravagant." "I'm not adjusting," I answered. "You are." She swallowed hard. "You're doing this to teach me something." "No," I said. "I'm doing this because I learned something." That seemed to confuse her. Perhaps she thought this was a negotiation tactic. A dramatic stand meant to extract apology and resume funding. But I wasn't bargaining. I was stepping away. And stepping away revealed something uncomfortable. Without my financial gravity, the entire structure tilted toward uncertainty. Not collapse. Uncertainty. The late attempts to fix it came disguised as reconciliation. Dinner invitations framed as family talks. Softer tones. Casual touches on my shoulder. Linda suggesting maybe we could share the aisle walk, a compromise. Compromise implies equal footing. I had never been on equal footing. The apologies focused on logistics. "We didn't realize you'd react this strongly. We assumed you'd still support us. We can word things differently at the ceremony." Word things differently, as if phrasing had been the wound. It wasn't phrasing. It was position. For the first time in years, I allowed the silence to stand without rushing to fill it. I let them feel what life looked like without a guaranteed backstop. I let Derek experience the weight of the title he had reclaimed so proudly. He attended planning meetings now. He asked about costs. His confidence dimmed each time numbers surfaced. Big speeches about real family don't pay vendors. That truth settled slowly, heavily. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't triumphant. I was detached. There is a difference. One night, alone in the living room, I looked around at the house. The furniture, the art, the framed moments. For years I had believed I was building a family. Now I saw I had been maintaining an arrangement. An arrangement where I funded stability in exchange for proximity. And proximity is not belonging. When the safety net disappears, everyone scrambles. Not necessarily because they miss the person holding it, but because they fear the fall. That was the realization that hardened everything. They weren't asking me to return because they valued me. They were asking because the numbers didn't work without me. So tell me, if you discover your love has been treated like insurance, what do you cancel first? The policy or the illusion? It wasn't the wedding that finally made it clear. It was the silence afterward. The house in Denver had never felt large before. It had always been full of plans, full of movement, full of Emily's voice rising from the kitchen while Linda mediated some small friction between past and present. But now the rooms felt wider. Echoes lasted longer. The condo in Santa Barbara sold within 3 weeks. Cash transfer. Clean. Efficient. The realtor congratulated me like I had accomplished something admirable. I felt nothing. Emily found out through the listing status change online. She didn't call immediately. She waited a day. Perhaps she hoped it was temporary. Perhaps she hoped I would reverse it like a bad decision made in anger. When she did call, her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It was thin. "You really sold it." "Yes. That was supposed to be part of my wedding." "It was supposed to be," I agreed. Silence. Then, softer. "Why are you doing this?" There it was again, that question framed as accusation. As if my withdrawal required justification. But her dismissal had been self-explanatory. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said calmly. "I'm adjusting my life. That affects us." "Yes." Another silence. I could hear her breathing. "You're punishing me." "No," I answered. "I'm removing myself." She didn't understand the distinction. Maybe she couldn't. For years, my presence had been intertwined with provision. They had never seen one without the other. So when I separated them, it felt violent. But separation isn't violence. Sometimes it's clarity. The wedding downsized again. A local venue replaced the coastal fantasy. Guest list trimmed further. Derek increased his visibility. More calls, more appearances, more statements about being there. I watched from a distance. He tried to step into the financial gap. But gaps don't close with sentiment. Linda attempted one last intervention. We sat across from each other at the dining table, the same table where Christmas had unfolded like a quiet execution. "You're dismantling everything," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm stepping out of what was never fully mine." Her eyes hardened slightly. "You were part of this family." "Was I?" I asked. She hesitated. That hesitation answered more than any argument could. "I always defended you," she insisted. "You minimized," I corrected. She looked down. Because she knew. She had softened Emily's tone for years. She had reinterpreted dismissals as stress. She had allowed Derek to hold ceremonial importance while I held responsibility. She hadn't meant harm. But harm doesn't require intent. It requires repetition. "I didn't think it mattered that much to you," she said quietly. That sentence nearly made me laugh. It didn't matter that much to you. 16 years. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Hospital visits. Business investments. Quiet nights reviewing contracts. But yes, it didn't matter. Not enough to earn a place. The final unraveling happened without shouting. Emily's fiancé called me directly one evening. First time he had done that. "I just want to understand," he said carefully. "Is there a way to fix this?" Fix. Another word implying repair of damage. "Fix what?" I asked. "The tension. The funding. Everything." "It isn't broken," I replied. "It's revealed." He didn't know how to respond to that. Because revelation feels cruel when you benefit from the illusion. The wedding proceeded. Smaller. Leaner. Still beautiful in its way. I attended. I wore a dark suit. I stood among guests like a distant relative. Derek walked her down the aisle. He looked proud. She looked radiant. I felt steady. Not shattered. Not raging. Steady. That surprised me more than anything. Because I realized something in that moment, watching them move forward without me at the center. I had never truly been central. I had been structural. Load-bearing. Invisible unless removed. When the ceremony ended, Emily hugged me tightly. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Coming. Not raising. Not building. Not standing beside. Coming. I hugged her back. "I wish you happiness," I said. And I meant it. But happiness without accountability is fragile. Weeks passed. The boutique stabilized at a smaller scale. The business restructuring strengthened my liquidity. Linda adjusted to new financial boundaries slowly, reluctantly. The house quieted into something resembling coexistence rather than unity. And in that quiet, I saw the full truth. I hadn't destroyed the family. I had simply stopped being its foundation. For years, everything had rested on my willingness to endure being secondary while functioning as primary support. When I removed that support, the imbalance became visible. They weren't evil. They weren't malicious. They were accustomed to my reliability, accustomed to my silence, accustomed to my funding. When that changed, it felt like betrayal. But it wasn't betrayal. It was recalibration. One night, alone in the living room, I looked at the Christmas tree still stored in the closet. Decorations boxed. Lights coiled. I realized something painful and freeing at the same time. Belonging cannot be purchased. And love without respect is dependency wearing polite language. I didn't ruin Christmas. I didn't sabotage a wedding. I didn't abandon anyone. I stopped financing a narrative that excluded me. So now I ask you, if you discover that your role in a family is conditional on your resources, do you keep paying for the privilege of being sidelined? Or do you step away and let the structure stand on what it truly is? Was I wrong? Or was I finally honest?